Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back once again to the OR News broadcast for our daily English news edition. As usual, I'm Daniel Cook, your host, presenting a translated version of the news Monday through Saturday at 6 p.m. In an effort to join the parties together in consensus, the U.S. Ambassador Donald Liu and the EU Ambassador Romana Vlahutin organized a meeting today for the experts of both sides. They also included the chairman of the ad hoc commission, Fatmir Jafai, and the Democratic MP Oerd Bulukbashi. The meeting was held in the Assembly building, and it is reported that the Democratic experts gave somewhat of an ultimatum. They asked that the discussion of the justice reform would continue only if it is going to be based on the recommendations from the Venice Commission. Sources from the opposition have indicated that they will rejoin the discussion, but only if the majority withdraws from the draft made by the experts on justice reform. The group of experts is expected to hold a meeting in the next few hours. The majority has indicated that they will agree to a political discussion on the justice reform, but only after the other phases are complete. After the coordinators of the ruling coalition met today, the Assembly Speaker Ilir Mehta encouraged the opposition to come and participate in the discussion and not to boycott the reform. He said, "I praise the work of the local and international experts on this reform and the involvement of the opposition experts. I ask them not to boycott this important work because there is no time to lose. An extraordinary job has been done so far, but there is much more to be done," said Mr. Mehta. He repeated that the Democratic experts would be welcome to come and join the review of the draft that will be sent to the Venice Commission. The Democratic experts have done a great job, he said. They play a part in reviewing the draft. I again invite them to return to the meetings and to not exclude themselves. We should maintain the spirit of cooperation. When asked by a journalist about whether a draft will be sent to Venice even without the input of the opposition, Mr. Mehta deflected the question. "I don't want to comment on technical things that are not up to me," he said. "Let's finish reviewing the draft, and later we will move toward political and parliamentary process that is necessary to finalize our changes. We will do everything we can in order to reach consensus, but this can only be done by participating in the meetings and not by boycotting them." With this statement, Mehta seemed to be conveying the unified attitude of the majority, having just come from a meeting with the Prime Minister and the chairman of the ad hoc commission. Prime Minister Rama left the meeting early to meet with the president, and sources say that the meeting was requested by Rama. The details of the meeting have not been released. Luzim Basha held a meeting today with the Democratic experts for justice reform. He stated afterwards that all of the Venice Commission recommendations must be reflected in the draft, and he made it clear that the opposition will not be part of the reform process if this is not the case. He said that the majority has introduced a parallel draft to the ad hoc commission, which he says is not in accordance with the Venice recommendations. Edi Rama should declare whether he is in favor of the Venice recommendations or not, he said. If yes, he must publicly deny the existence of a parallel draft, which is not a consensual product. The second step is to read the conclusions of Venice together, and the third is for the experts to work on a single draft. He must instruct his experts to follow the Venice recommendations like I have done, said Basha. Ever since the 4th of January, the majority and the opposition are in a stalemate over the draft of the justice reform. The opposition experts have refused to be part of the commission, claiming that the majority does not want to follow the Venice Commission recommendations. The people of Shijak are trying to recover from the floods this past week. They are now clearing the mud and debris out of their homes and staying with relatives or in the upper stories of their buildings. Understandably, their spirits are low, as great damage has been done to their homes and their lives. In Sukth, the residents complain that they are dealing with this situation alone. They complain that they are getting no help and that their homes are no longer livable. Today, they held a protest in the center of the village, demanding a rapid assessment of damage and immediate compensation. 5 teams from the emergency staff are monitoring the situation and are actively calculating the damage. It's reported that hundreds of houses and over 1,000 hectares of land are still underwater. The Ministry of Agriculture has published a preliminary record of how much land has been flooded in the last few days. According to the ministry, there are 5,300 hectares of agricultural land that was flooded by the Shkumbin and Erzen rivers. Shijak is the area that is affected the most by the floods, and the Shkumbini River reached extremely high levels. The pressure of the river broke through the embankment in one of the areas around Lushnya, flooding 500 hectares, but the military has been working hard to repair it. According to the ministry, there are 1,500 hectares of land flooded in Leja, 500 hectares in Lushnya, and altogether the Erzen River flooded 3,000 hectares of land. The ministry made the following statement today. The work continues in the flooded areas. The pumping stations have been working at full capacity, and there was no loss of power. The drainage channels and the riverbanks are being monitored continuously, and we have taken all of the necessary precautions in the areas that are most at risk. INSTAT reports that weak levels of consumption have continued through the holiday season. They report that the inflation rate was around 2%, which is much lower than it generally is at this time of year when holiday purchases increase the consumption. The annual growth of prices in December was mainly driven by the food and beverages category, which increased by 2%. The price of alcoholic beverages and tobacco also marked growth in this period, together with the entertainment and culture category and the hotels, cafes, and restaurants category. The inflation rate in December hit the minimum target provided by the Bank of Albania. Inflation was characterized by low levels throughout 2015 due to weak consumption fueled by the citizens' uncertainty in the market. The Ombudsman Igli Totazani has denounced the political attacks that are made against him every time he raises concerns about the rights of the needy. He was present today at the activity for the 25th anniversary of the Association of the Blind, and he listed some of the difficulties that the human rights organizations are facing in Albania. He said, "When we try to deal with human rights, myself and my organization receive many political attacks. The life of a person who deals with human rights in Albania is not easy. We have to face both politics and the society." Also present at the activity, the Vice Ambassador of the OSCE, Robert Wilton, spoke about the lack of accommodations for disabled people. He said, "The voice of the civil society is very important and needs to be involved in the democracy. It contributes to the state functioning well." After 25 years, the leaders of the Association for the Blind say that there are still many challenges to face, and that disabled people will still have a great deal of difficulty finding employment. That concludes our edition for this evening. Thanks so much for watching. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with more translated news in English. Have a great night.